Hello everyone, my name is Sir Chargelot and today I am going to be making a tier list for the dispositions available in Warhammer 40k 11th edition based on how good I think they are for Blood Angels. This is a question I've gotten quite frequently in my Instagram DMs and I'm quite interested in answering it. So, first things first, we are going to start off with my personal favourite, and that is going to be Purge the Foe. Now, in my personal opinion, as a disposition, I think Purge the Foe sits somewhere around the high B to low A tier. However, for Blood Angels specifically, I'm going to put it in S tier, and here is my reasoning why. So, as you know, new Vanguard veterans have come out recently, and I'm just going to put up their new stat line on the screen for you now.
What? What the fuck?
You can see that at first glance, they seem to be not much better than just your standard Blade Guard veterans in terms of melee. However, then you look at the fact that they get lethal hits on the charge, and also the leader options you compare them with, specifically in Rage Cursed Onslaught, 25 attacks at Strength 6, AP 3, Damage 2. And if you're interested in what this can take down, things like Defilers and Imperial Knights just tend to drop more or less instantly if you oath for the reroll hits. In terms of other things, I think that while Purge the Foe, in my opinion, is very, very good for Blood Angels, it's also very, very limited in that the only Purge detachment I think is actually good for us is Rage Cursed Onslaught. I think Wrath of the Doomed is absolutely terrible. And I'm also of the opinion that Lost Brethren is still RCO's trash little cousin that no one actually wants to play.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
I think that what we need to consider when it comes to RCO is that we are no longer running those big bricks we are used to. It is no longer, 30 Death Company. It is no longer 25 Death Company. In my opinion, it should always be the Lamarty's brick, and then 2 5-mans of Death Company, and then you want to have some other mini nukes as well. So you want to run the Vanguard vets, a 3-man of Sangard with a captain maybe. But I think if you just sequence those mini nukes correctly, you can absolutely play to the strengths of Purge the Foe and do exactly what the disposition missions want you to do, while also scoring visceral amounts of points for slaughtering and killing, which is what we're very good at doing as Blood Angels. I think that Purge the Foe for RCO has only a few genuinely terrible matchups which we would lose on any other given detachment anyway, simply by virtue of the fact of what those detachments actually allow us to do. If you try and get out of that mindset of playing your 10th edition lists and you just go back to the drawing board a bit, I think that there's a lot of scoring potential there simply off the basis of killing. Reconnaissance. Now, I haven't had too much experience with recon, I will be honest. However, what I am abysmally aware of is that I think the only recon detachment we have access to that is genuinely viable for Marines, if I'm not mistaken, is Librarius Conclave. Now, Librarius Conclave did take quite a nasty hit as a result of people running the nefarious 10 Stern Guard brick that no one likes to see. I do not think Reconnaissance is a great mission for Blood Angels. I think the Recon requires you to either have absolute board pressure whenever you want it, so both shooting and melee, or it requires you to have a lot of throwaway units that you can just toss into the bin whenever you want. And I don't think Blood Angels quite specifically facilitates either of these. We also don't want to be spending too much time doing actions. We don't particularly have a lot of objective control, which is required for a lot of the Recon missions. Obviously, you can build your list specifically to facilitate these requirements. However, I think there are other armies that are a lot more efficient at doing so, and I think that Blood Angels will generally struggle quite a lot to score points on the recon disposition, and will have to skew their lists out of the angle they usually want to be in order to actually score their primary, which will make secondary scoring more difficult. By virtue of that fact, I am going to put recon in C tier. And priority assets is an interesting one, because priority assets tends to focus quite a lot on the central objective. There is some actioning involved, but not a ridiculous amount of actioning. And I feel like, as Blood Angels, we are quite efficient at spearheading our force and our power into one location of the map. And it doesn't force us to spread ourselves thin, which is something we never want to do. However, the problem with priority assets is not necessarily within the disposition itself, but it's within the detachments we can find it in. There are three primary ways to play priority assets, those being Stormlance and Legacy, Angelic Host and Legacy, and then, of course, Angelic Inheritors. Now, while all three of these detachments have access to varying things like Lance, lethal hits, sustained hits, depending on what detachments you take, it is quite difficult to make up for the lack of volume that we would otherwise find in Liberator Assault Group and in RCO. That being said, I think that as a result of priority assets simply just being such a powerful and such a strong disposition, as we saw at WTC, and it being so easy to score points for priority assets, I think it cannot be discounted just how efficient of a dispo this is. If you can get out of the mindset of killing and slaughtering like we do with Liberator, like we do with RCO, and you can focus more so on playing tactical Warhammer and optimizing your points attainment, priority assets is by far, I think, the best disposition we have. And as a result of that, I'm going to put it in S tier. And actually, come to think of it, while we're doing that, I'm going to put Purge the Foe down to A tier, simply by virtue of the fact that Purge requires a much more active, much more aggressive playstyle, and there are a lot more points of failure with Purge the Foe. For example, failing to kill the target that you were planning on killing, whereas with priority assets, all you have to do is ensure your control over the appropriate objective marker, do your action, and you have much less to worry about. Now, as far as take and hold goes, we have one detachment that uses this disposition in our codex, and that is Liberator Assault Group. Now, what do I think of this? I think a lot of people heavily overrate how good Liberator is with take and hold. While Liberator is built very well to facilitate take and hold, the problem at the end of the day is that Blood Angels are simply just far too expensive and far too fragile to actually hold. We are very good at taking, we are not so good at holding, because when you look at the stat lines of our units, now, when you really boil it down, yes, there are units you can run. There are the 6-Blade Guard with the Sanguinary Priest. There are throwaway units of Intercessors or Jump Pack Intercessors that you can throw onto an objective. But you have to play it very, very efficiently, because otherwise your objectives will get taken off you, and your units either will not survive until the next turn to hold that objective for you, or your opponent will simply be taking it off you willy-nilly with something like Eldar, Drakari, Orcs, where everything, for whatever reason, is OC2. I think that we as Blood Angels struggle quite a lot with this simply because of the durability and OC factor. I think that it does have play. I think that, especially in team settings, if you were to run very specific lists, for example, take a 10-man Terminator brick with a Librarian so that they can have Lance, Lethals, and Sustain on the charge, there's a lot of play around this. However, I think that you need to be very careful with how you choose to play take and hold. And also, I think that some of the matchups you would normally consider to be good matchups do become marginally worse, simply because we struggle to hold those objectives more than other armies do. As a result of that, I am going to put it in B tier. Oh, great. We come to this one. Disruption. Disruption is kind of the disposition nobody likes. It's utterly atrocious. I think that Disruption can only be played by armies that are otherwise so well piloted or so broken that they would be performing well anyways on the other 4 dispositions. I do not trust Disruption at all. My problem with Disruption is that there are 5 different missions in the Disruption matrix, and all 5 of them seem to play for completely different armies. There is no consistency in playstyle. You cannot build a list around Disruption, especially for Blood Angels, because we are a very one-faceted army. Even if you were to play something like Angelic Host or in Carmine Spear Tip to take the Disruption disposition, even if you were to build your list entirely around the missions that Disruption asks you to play, you would still struggle heavily, and you'd actually probably end up losing some of the power that you look for in Blood Angels, and you would have to give up a lot of your playstyle. I do not think this is a good disposition. I think this is the disposition that they included for diversity purposes. I think that they just needed a 5th one for teams, and that's why they included it. Disruption seems like it was written as a complete afterthought, and personally, I would not want to play the Disruption into Reconnaissance matchup ever, because if you choose to look at the actual method of how decoys are placed and how they are eliminated, we run into problems quite quickly. So, as a result of that, Disruption is going to go into... There we go. That's where I'm putting Disruption for Blood Angels. I think that it is genuinely that bad of a disposition. It is not playable. You will not win games on Disruption. Unless you're like the best player of all time, then sure, you can win games on Disruption against people who are worse than you. However, I think Disruption, into the majority of matchups where you are equally skilled and your armies are on relatively equal footings, will always underperform. And I think that your games will on Disruption will always be tighter than they would on the other four dispositions because they just score so much more efficiently than Disruption does. Disruption has so many hurdles for you to jump through, more hurdles than the Olympics, quite frankly. So, in conclusion, these are my disposition rankings for Blood Angels in the current state of the game. It should be noted that there is a data slate most likely next week. We have yet to see how dispositions are going to be altered by that, or how Blood Angels are going to be affected by that. So now I will go on to discussing what units I think you should be running in each disposition, and what detachment combos you should be taking. We'll start off with priority assets. As far as priority assets goes, I think that the best combo for priority assets is either Angelic Inheritors or Legacy of Grace and Angelic Host. In either case of those two, you should be running Plasma Inceptors. They are absolutely amazing at killing the elite infantry that we do not want to deal with. Damage 3 is just such an asset to us, and them being twin linked allows us to punch up quite hard into things like Greater Demons. I would strongly recommend taking a Thunder Strike in either detachment. That way you can pair it with a Baal Predator, and you will have a quite good output overall between the Inceptors and the Baal Predators at simply just blasting down things that you do not want to deal with. Big things like demons, elite units like Death Shroud, elite units like Terminators. And so I think that taking combos like that is going to really benefit you, and it's going to really facilitate you getting that central objective that you want on the majority of priority assets dispositions. I think that for Legacy of Grace, you want to be running 2 6-mans of Sangard, because in Angelic Host, the detachment that you should be pairing with Legacy of Grace, there is a stratagem where you can simply sacrifice a unit of JPIs or scouts or even a Baal Predator if you need to. Simply just something dies to something else, and then you get full hit and wound rerolls with Sangard against that. Very good for matchups like Imperial Knights and Chaos Knights. Very good for matchups like Demons. Simply just force your opponent to kill something with something that's a bit too valuable, and immediately you have the upper hand on them. In terms of Angelic Inheritors, I think you should be running 2 3-mans of Sangard. I don't think 6-mans are the play. I think they are just too expensive. I mean, you can run them if you want to. I think there's definitely an angle for them, but I think they are a very expensive investment. I think the problem with 3 3-mans is that now that unit taxes are a thing, you will definitely suffer in terms of points availability for the rest of your list. For overall, I think for priority assets in general, you want Inceptors, you want Baal Predators, potentially a Thunderstrike. Obviously, you want Land Speeders. I think it goes without saying that all of these detachments will want Land Speeders simply because they are amazing at dealing with small transports, smaller units that we don't necessarily want to charge. They can occasionally punch up into bigger things like Primarchs, Defilers, Catans, and just give your opponent something to potentially worry about. For Purge the Foe, I think 5-man Death Company, absolutely excellent in RCO. Scout unit is a must-take in every single list. Scout 5 Death Company is a missile into your opponent, blast something off the board. Immediately, you're on the upper hand, especially if you know how to trade well. I think that 5-man Vanguard Veterans can punch up way above their weight. I think that they should be in every single RCO list, at least until the Space Marines Codex drops and we see what's up with them. I think that as far as Astrath goes in RCO, I think that with Dev Wounds now being fixed for precision, I think that he can do quite well as a character eliminator. I think that with the reroll 1s to wound, the Dev Wounds on his unit can also perform quite well. I think Lamarti's 10-man should be in every single RCO list. That unit is so valuable and it does so much for what it is. It should never be underestimated, honestly. I think that you just need that every single time. So in conclusion, 5-man Death Company, Land Speeders. Again, you want Baal Predators just to clear out the chaff that you don't necessarily want to fight against. And you're going to want the Lamarti's Brick. I think 3-man Sandguards are also extremely efficient in RCO. Being able to push Spears to AP3 really allows you to do a lot. The next thing we want to be concerned about is Take and Hold. Now, in Take and Hold, you can either run Stormlance Vengeful Hosts, or you can choose to run Liberator Assault Group. Now, the thing is with either of these is that you need big, durable units to sit on those objectives and take punishment. Otherwise, you will never score any points at all in the later stages of the game when your opponent is making forcible moves towards you. In this case, then I think that in either case you want to be running either the Lamati's 10-man or 6-man Sangard bricks. I think especially in the case of Liberator, you want to be running the Sanguinary Priest with the 6 Blade Guard veterans. I personally find that unit extremely boring and a waste of my time, which is why I don't play Liberator very much anymore. But I think that it does have its merit statistically on paper. It is not an easy unit for most armies to deal with. I think that you also want to consider running the Assault Terminator's brick with a Librarian in Terminator armor. A lot of people overlook this unit. However, you can get Lance, Lethals, and Sustained hits on a brick of Terminators that have 4 Thunderhammers and 6 Lightning Claws. The output of that unit with +1 attack cannot ever be underestimated, especially with Oath of Moment. You obviously want to be running JPIs in lag. Their value is just utterly insane. The amount of things that they can kill with that strength buff and that attacks volume buff is just obnoxious. A unit of JPIs with Lance Lethal will kill a Rhino. So that is something to consider. Very good for matchups like Emperor's Children, where we want to kill things immediately. Bar Predators, again, like, this is going to be a recurring theme. I think Bar Predators are honestly one of the best units in our entire codex, and I think they should be in every single list until if or when they get sent to Legends. They have so much output with those 3 Flamer weapons, and they can threaten your opponent so much. It is so good into matchups with lots of 2-wound infantry that are very valuable. Very good into Emperor's Children. Very good into Orcs. Very good into Marines in general. Very good into Xenos as well, specifically things like Drukhari. Just very good overall at eliminating things, threatening Overwatches, and forcing your opponent to deal with a 125-point model. I think that is going to be another takeaway here. You want your 6-man Sandguards, you want your 6-man Blade Guard veterans with the Sanguinary Priest, you want potentially your Lamatis, you want your Land Speeders, you want your Bar Predators. As far as reconnaissance goes, I guess the Fusillade brick is still viable. I think if you're running Recon Librarius Conclave, one of the best things you can do is run Librarians with Sanguinary Priests in Assault Intercessor 10-man bricks. While this is very unorthodox, it does still give you a bit of punching power, especially if you pair it with Stormlance, and it does give you quite a durable unit to just sit on objectives and do those actions. It's not likely you'll be blown smooth off the board in the next turn, and Assault Intercessors are OC2 at the end of the day, so it is possible that they stay alive with that 3-up, 4-up, 5-up, so it is something to consider and take into account. But again, I would not recommend running Reconnaissance. As far as Disruption goes, I mean, all of the previous still applies. I just don't recommend playing Disruption in general. I think it's a nerf to yourself, and I think that there are armies that play it much better. Custodes, Orcs definitely play Disruption much better. Emperor's Children, Carnival of Excess definitely plays Disruption much better. If you're playing Disruption, you effectively just need to be either able to overwhelm your opponent with so many bodies that they cannot stop you from scoring, or to just table them so quickly that you can play the game as you so please from turn 2 onwards. That is my overall assessment of dispositions, units you should take, and just in general, what you should be running, what you can run, what I think is competitively viable. Please leave ideas for the next video down in the comments below. I would love to hear what your opinions are. Thank you, and see you in the next one. Goodbye.